All right, we'll get going. Welcome to downtown Grand Forks. This is the time and place for the Grand Forks Growth Fund Committee. Item 1, roll call.
Crary.
Here.
Holt.
Here.
Fahmy.
Here.
Osowski. Here. Weigel.
Here.
Whitney.
Here.
Wolf.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Item number 2, Flex Pace Loan Request, Wallwork Truck Center. Mr. Lund.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Growth Fund Committee, Keith Lund, Grand Forks Region EDC. Do this a little differently for the next 2 applications. Both of them require a little bit of an upfront explanation. I'm going to do that. Call on the representative of the company to tell you a little bit about who they are, what they're doing, and why. And then Kevin Hatcher will come up and just kind of walk through the details of the loan for you. So the first application that you've just announced is Wallwork Truck Center. From a timing standpoint, I wanted to provide just a little bit of a background. So the EDC and the city, Mr. Phelan, Mayor Buczynski, and others on city staff met with representatives of Wallwork more than a year ago and talked a little bit about, the region and how we were served, and quite frankly, how not served from a logistics transportation standpoint, and wanting to see what we could do to support that, to help really provide a base where other important industries could grow, agribusiness and manufacturing in particular. They had a potential project in mind, and we had talked about 2 areas of support. One of them is a property tax exemption, and then other is a flex pace loan. Property tax exemption, they have acquired and are now completing the project at their facility on Gateway Drive, and that's the timing issue. Usually we're here up front prior to the beginning of the construction, or beginning of the project. We all got busy doing the business of business and moved forward with our workload, and so we're now here now talking about the project. They're transitioning the project from internal financing, so temporary financing, into permanent financing now. The property tax exemption was covered through the City of Grand Forks Commercial Property Tax Exemption Program, taking an existing facility and increasing its value, and so the incremental value was exempt for a 5-year period of time. So that's been accomplished. We're trying to put in place now what we had discussed at that time, which was a flex pace loan, which is allowable by the Bank of North Dakota in terms of different priorities that each community may identify. And while not officially a policy of the Growth Fund, I think there's been a consensus through the administration, and I think even with visiting some from committee members, that we need a little bit of support in terms of logistics and transportation in our community. So that's just a little bit of a background to why we're here today as the project is wrapping up and why they're putting in a permanent financing. What I'd like to, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer from a timing standpoint. And if there are none, I think what I would like to do right now is introduce Casey Lindgren from Wallwork Truck Center to give a little bit of a background of him, who they are, what they're doing, and why. And then, as I mentioned, Kevin will get up after that and talk a little bit about going through the details of the loan. And at that point, any of us, I'm sure, would be happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lund. Mr. Lindgren.
Good afternoon. Casey Lindgren, General Manager, Wallwork Truck Center, North Dakota. We came to Grand Forks due to multiple reasons, but many of them was just hearing that the community was underserved. So we sought out a facility, priced out new versus used, and decided to do a little recon. So we have since got the building fully operational and fully staffed. Now we're just looking for a little support. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Lindgren? Mr. Osowski?
So is it, you guys just fix trucks kind of like Cummins? Is that what
Correct.
you
We are a PACCAR dealer. We represent the Kenworth brand.
Okay.
So we fix PACCAR, Cummins, Eaton transmissions, multiple different manufacturers. So.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Fahmy?
And your current staff was it 44? Was that right?
Give or take.
Yeah. And are those folks that you brought in, folks from this community?
A lot of folks from the community.
Okay.
We brought in a couple of key managers from other locations that moved to Grand Forks and the surrounding area.
Do you plan to be involved with the Career Academy potentially?
Yes, we do. Very involved.
Very cool. Thank you.
And heavily support it.
Perfect. Very cool.
Ms. Whitney?
Just a question. I know it says in the report that there's potential to hire the additional, at least 7 FTEs. What helps you make the decision on adding those staff in relation to your business currently and versus holding at this point based on what we're looking at?
First was just getting operational. We are training, currently spending a lot of revenue on training and getting people up to snuff before we want to start doing alternate shifts and and running 24 hours a day, hopefully is kind of the end goal, so. And we've been pleasantly surprised with the amount of business. We are jam-packed every day.
Thank you. Any further, Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Mr. Lindgren, thanks for being here. Thanks for the investment in the community. First, Chair, just a note here. I do have a potential conflict of interest here with my role at Alaris and with the Walworth Group. We're not involved in this transaction. I'm comfortable discussing and voting if the committee would be comfortable with that, but I did want to disclose that there is a potential conflict here. So first, maybe we should discuss that.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Mr. Curry?
I make a motion to allow Mr. Wolf the ability to vote.
Second, or a motion for Mr. Curry, second for Ms. Osowski. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, committee. My question would be more, wouldn't be for necessarily Mr. Lindgren, but more for Mr. Lund or Mr. Hatcher as far as the approval goes with the, has this been approved through the Bank of North Dakota, the status of that at this point, or where's that at, is one question. The other question would be commenting on, I think it's in the application, but what are the terms of the note? The note to the borrower, what's the rate versus what's it being bought down? I know it's a short buy down period, I believe 3 years, but comment on the structure. So would appreciate it if you could address that.
Mr. Hatcher?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Wagle. Thank you, Mr. Wolf, members of the Growth Fund Committee. First off, what I can do is I can just go over the total project, and then I can follow up with the question you have, Mr. Wolf, here. So the total project we have is $4,063,000. The FlexPay subsidy requested to reduce the interest rate from the estimated 4.5 to 1% on the $3 million note from Bremer Bank, and that's to purchase the property and renovations. And that's to do the subsidy portion, the local portion of $107,692, and that will leverage the state Bank of North Dakota portion of $200,000. Now, as everyone is well aware, interest rates are a little bit higher nowadays, so that grant portion from Bank of North Dakota, to answer your question, is actually causing to get exhausted sooner than normal, that we've seen in the past, so that's reducing the term a little bit sooner to that 48 months, I believe it's listed at. So that's the reason behind the sooner the deferment period, so that's when we would roll over into the loan portion, the local portion for the city here. So, and to give further context regarding the project here, so the project includes purchasing the existing building while it's located 5505 Gateway Drive, kind of east of the new Walmart over on 32nd there, or Gateway, excuse me. And then it includes a remodeling, addition of a truck repair bay, approximately $2.7 million project for that, and then some additional renovations from the current property. And then Ms. Whitney also mentioned the seven full-time employees with for the expansion for additional staff there at the location.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher. I'll just add one thing. I live in the northwest corner of Grand Forks. The way the property was before, there was a little bit left to be desired, and so thank you to your company for putting the investment into it, and I think it looks great, and it's great to have more investment on the north end of Grand Forks. Is there any comments or motions? Moved by Osowski,
Second.
second by Kavami. Any further discussion? Oh, Holth, sorry. Long lost brother over there, got it.
Aye.
If there's any further discussion, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Move on to item number 3, PACE loan request, Huntsville Properties LLC.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, here to consider the request of Huntsville Property on behalf of Young Manufacturing. The reason I'm providing a little bit of context here is it didn't quite go through the typical process that these loans go through. This has been a little accelerated, and I'll explain the reasons for that. We were at a meeting last week to talk about this project, and we're asked to consider, and it's a really good project, and Kevin will talk about that, and I can as well. But we were really asked to accelerate this for a couple of different reasons. So Mr. Altapeter is purchasing, he's the owner of Air Cedar Parts, if you've heard of that company, a successful local company. They're purchasing Young Manufacturing, or the intent is to purchase Young Manufacturing. That's been negotiated in negotiations for a while, and they're at the point now to where, for a couple of different reasons, they wanted to accelerate it. Number one was they wanted to notify their customers and their employees as quickly as possible. They wanted to have some traction and momentum going in terms of the loan to have a sense that this was going to happen. Number two, in terms of their core business or their original business, Air Cedar Parts, late March, early April was an extremely busy time for them. They wanted to have the loan closed and as much of the transition completed by that time, so they can, direct the right amount of attention to Air Cedar Parts. And thirdly, I guess I would say, is really just to leverage the intent and the momentum that they'd have. There's a willing seller and a willing buyer, and they both, were moving forward with the intent to accelerate this, and they wanted to leverage that alignment of thought, so to kind of get this moving forward. EDC policy, so the typical process is our EDC board will review these applications, make a recommendation, and then we'll bring that recommendation to this committee. Our EDC bylaws do allow, in times of time sensitivity, to allow our executive committee to meet and act on behalf of the board in between board meetings, and we did that just this afternoon. So we reviewed the application, the metrics, the loan to value, all the collateral, the business model, and it's a sound business again. Kevin will talk about that, and made the recommendation that I am bringing to you in terms of the board, and to make a recommendation that we move this forward for approval. I also wanted to address a second part of that, and I'll pause for some questions. We don't often have in front of us acquisitions of existing businesses, so I wanted to address that. We've done that. It has been a little while, but we have done that. And the reason we think is important, somewhere between 75% of your sustained job growth in the community will come from businesses that are right here. We all like the big headlines of the new company, but the reality is we spend more time talking to and supporting companies that are here, supporting their growth. And whether that's a company growing internally or whether that's being through an acquisition of an existing company, it's always great when a company, a primary sector company in this case, is acquired by somebody local with some synergy with that business who intends to grow that business. The alternative is potentially somebody out of state or out of the region purchasing it. Even if they intend to originally maintain operations, you just never know how much of that activity, both the business activity and the employment base, is going to remain. So it's really a win when we could, sort of leverage and support that kind of activity. So whether we're doing something, or a company we've been here before this, I think it's very much the same thing in supporting that organic growth in our community. At this point, I think I'll pause and see if there's any questions in terms of the process. We're deviating a little bit, but according to EDC bylaw. We'll end up reporting this to our board in our meeting next week, and if by chance they have some different opinion, I'm not anticipating that. I have two board members here, maybe they can weigh in. We would obviously bring that to the JDA, but again, our bylaws allow for it, and then any conversation relative to acquisition versus what we traditionally do.
How often do you guys have those board meetings?
On a monthly basis. They're the first Thursday of every month with the exception of July.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments? Mr. Crary?
With the expedited process, have they already begun with BND?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we have representatives if you'd like to hear from them, but the answer to that is yes, we have representatives from Assurity Financial and Choice Bank as well. This project is underway. Understanding is it's all been negotiated, it's ready to go. If I'm misstating, anyone behind me can correct me. But we're really just, the final piece of this, in addition to some gap finances, is being proposed to bring this to fruition at this time.
Ms. Osowski?
I guess I just have a comment for you.
Sure.
I don't like hearing that this is not the typical process and that we push things through. I guess I would prefer if things went through the proper process. I just want to make sure that everybody's being treated fairly when it comes to these different types of loans. And I understand that you guys are allowed to bypass the board, but I would prefer that processes be kept and followed.
Thank you.
If I, If I could make a comment. So, Mrs. Sowski, I agree. And in transparency, I'm one of the people on those board, and I'm also on the executive committee, so I was in the meeting earlier today. I agree that this is not the preferred way of doing things, but I think the reasons that Mr. Lund outlined, I think warrant moving it forward. I think I've been on the board of the EDC now for 5-6 years maybe, and I can only remember 2 or 3 times when we've done this in this fashion. So it's rare. I do think that the reasons that Mr. Lund outlined make it a reasonable request at this point. I would just add, though, I think, as Mr. Lund noted, that we will talk about it at our next board meeting. I do think, typically what that looks like is the application is put forward and we have a robust discussion around it, including with the applicants present to present on that. And I would assume we're going to do that at our next board meeting, and would report back immediately if there were any concerns raised by board members. Is that accurate?
That's right. Our bylaws provide the flexibility, as I outlined. Our board policy requires us to bring the application as presented to the board, walk through the metrics of that, and ask for concurrence of that recommendation of the executive committee. If that board action were any different at all from the recommendation from the executive committee, that would be immediately communicated to you as chair, I guess. We've never had to do this, so we would communicate that to chair, but also certainly the Jobs Development Authority, which would meet on the 6th and the 6th.
So that was a long way of me saying that I agree with you and don't want to make a habit out of this. I just think it's a unique situation in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Mr. Wolf?
I would just concur as another member of the EDC board. I'm not on the executive committee, but and agree with Mrs. Sowski that not the preferred choice under the circumstances. I'm fine with discussing it and understand why it, with an acquisition and for the reasons you mentioned, that this could get to this point. But I do prefer when it goes through the formal channels. But I'm personally fine with this one proceeding with the discussion.
Thank you. Mr. Curry?
I think, quick question, and maybe it's more so for the company or the acquirer, but so obviously PACE a lot of times too is for, expansion, and obviously Young is definitely, obviously 75-year-old company, super successful. No, nothing wrong with that, that's great. Just a question, sorry, is this, you guys getting feedback?
No, but I can hear you.
Okay. So the question, I guess, is, and in the application, the current number of employees 44 going to 50. Obviously, that's great. That's expansion. Is that just because of normal business operations are going well and they continue to expand? Are they going to, with the acquisition, are they kind of trying to open up another avenue to get those new employees and expand some other product, or I guess how is that just under normal operations, or is this? Are they open up a whole other avenue to get those 6 additional employees?
I'll let them address that. It's integrated with their existing business, and there's some opportunity for some synergies there. So I guess maybe based on that question, Mr. Chairman, if that's all right, I'd like to introduce Andrew Altepeter, who's representing the owner and the acquisition of the company. Before I do that, I'll mention that this loan is focused on, while there's an acquisition of the business, this loan is focused on the real estate portion of it and collateralized in such a manner. So with that, Mr. Altepeter.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks for meeting with me today. My name is Andrew Altepeter. I'm the business director of Air Cedar Parts and Huntsville Properties. Air Cedar Parts, we came to Grand Forks. We're me and my brother is the owner, Daniel, and we were raised in East Grand Forks on the farm. Long story short, as far as Air Cedar Parts, we had a few ideas on how to make and design different aftermarket parts for the egg industry. And it's been quite the experience. We've came to Grand Forks, we purchased a building, we've been running out of there for about 2.5, 3 years now. Our growth has been exponential. We've been able to increase employees and we've been able to grow. Young Manufacturing is our main manufacturer of some of our main components that comprise 45 to 50% of our overall revenue. So when this opportunity came up, it was obviously something that we wanted to pursue, not only for the advantages, but also the disadvantages of, like Keith said, if somebody comes to town and wants to purchase it and then revamp things. That's not what we're trying to do. We obviously are buying this because we've been working with Dave, we've been working with their employees, we have quite a relationship with them, and we see a lot of potential. Not only just from their regular day-to-day business, but we have probably 25 to 30 different vendors, including Young's, that are from outside of the state, that manufacture things that, to answer your question as far as how are we going to add those employees, we plan on bringing some of those things back in-house and doing it the right way. We don't want to overextend, we don't want to ruin any relationships that they currently have with their vendors, but we want to, we obviously want to grow. So this opportunity, obviously, it kind of came up kind of last minute, and it wasn't anything that we had in our strategy at the current time, because it was something where, you know, we're happy, we have a good relationship with Young's, and we want to continue to grow that, but circumstances made it where we have to, you know, we had an opportunity, so we're trying to pursue it.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney?
Thank you, and I'm excited to hear that there is a potential opportunity, and this might actually be a question for Mr. Lund, but with the way this particular loan is packaged, or how does this impact the previous growth fund loan that we did for back in, I think it was 2020 for that? So I think I see in the paperwork where there's 2 growth fund amounts in there. I'm assuming these are all kind of tied together. Are we bundling them or changing them in any way, or?
They're
Just trying
going to be
set
2
some
separate, my
clarity there
understanding.
for
It's just under the same entity. The Huntsville Properties is the landholding company, and they're going to be two separate loans under the same entity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Any motions? Mr. Hatcher, did you want to add anything?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Weigel, members of the Growth Fund Committee. Just going to fulfill you in on the total project financing detail here. So the total project is $6,054,000 roughly. Pay subsidy request to reduce the interest rate. It's estimated from 6.5% to 2% on that $2,048,000 note that Keith mentioned for the real estate portion of the project. This is focusing on the purchase of the buildings, and that portion, the loan request for the pay subsidy would be the community portion of $107,692, leveraging again the $200,000 from Bank of North Dakota. This one will be a estimated 42-month deferred period at 2% interest for the community portion. So this is also secured through the personal guarantee from the owner, Daniel Peterson, subordinate mortgage on the property, and then also a loan to value of 84%.
Thank you.
Any questions at all?
Mr. Wolf?
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Altepeter, again, thanks to you and your team and brother for investment in the region. A question for maybe Mr. Hatcher, you can answer you've answered the terms. Is there a closing date scheduled? Has this been approved from Choice as well as BND? A little bit of color there. And then typically we'll see in the write-up that everything is compliant with the growth fund requirements. I just want to confirm that what we're doing is in compliance with our growth fund requirements.
Yep, it's ongoing. I guess like we can do further context with Assurity Financial to kind of give more clarity as far as Bank of North Dakota and the bank process. As far as I'm aware, that this is a ink deal coming later this week or after the JDA meeting. So this flex space opportunity, it's what's leveraging the final deal for the whole process.
So has there been a closing date scheduled, or is that?
It's scheduled for February 10th.
February 10th.
February
Thank you,
10th.
Mr. Erickson. To get here before then? Okay, thank you. That's helpful because it addresses the process question that we talked about. Thank you. Ms. Richards, what we're looking to do, comments on this being in compliance with growth fund requirements?
Yes, everything sounds good. Our concern was, again, the speed with which this has come through. We didn't really feel comfortable recommending approving it until we had heard these things, but yes, no concerns at this point with a motion to approve.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Move approval.
Moved by Prayer, seconded by Kavami. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hatcher, and good luck to property owners. Item number 4, RFP for Tech Accelerator naming rights. Ms. Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Weigel. We had planned on having Johnny Ryan, our managing director, here to address this, but he was taken sick, so I'm going to try to cover it on my own, so bear with me here. This is obviously kind of a unique situation for the Growth Fund to be in the world of naming rights, but in conversations with the city attorney, he did advise that this is a public asset and a public process is necessary. So we sought out some help from Derek Holford, who works at the Alara Center in terms of some of the promotional stuff that they do to get some assistance on how to approach this. The upshot is that the RFP draft that is part of your staff report, the key elements are that we're looking at a minimum, what I'm calling bid for lack of a better term, sponsorship rate of $500,000 or $50,000 a year. So it would be a 10-year naming rights that we're looking to sell. Based on advice of the folks at the Alara Center, typically these naming rights includes the sponsor taking responsibility for redesigning the logo, the name, installing and designing the signage and maintaining the signage over time. Obviously at the Alara Center there's a lot more signage than we're talking about at the building across the street, but this would be exterior signage that they would basically procure, design, and install in conjunction with Growth Fund approval, and of course it has to meet all applicable signage codes and zoning codes. In terms of the use of the name The Hive, which we've kind of brought forward as an interim name, the RFP says that we're encouraging them to incorporate that, but it's certainly not required. That will be one of the things that when the proposals are received, that will be something that we can weigh in on, you can weigh in on in terms of evaluating the proposals. As I mentioned, we've talked to the city attorney about this briefly in the interim between now and when the JDA will meet. We hope to get with Mr. Gostad and actually review this in depth and also look at an actual naming rights agreement that would be the expectation that at the end of this process, that agreement would be executed by the JDA and the sponsor. The process to actually issue the RFP, that was where Mr. Ryan was going to speak to it. He is looking at developing kind of an online portal for proposers to see kind of this bureaucratic document that I've produced, as well as, you know, some drone footage, kind of a virtual tour of the building. So that is to come. Can't really show it to you yet, but that's the process that we're anticipating is an online proposal process that will allow potential sponsors to, you know, kind of virtually see the building inside and out. So with that, certainly willing to answer any questions I can, but the request today is authorizes to proceed with this RFP process, which will be issued upon JDA authorization early next month and then close with a deadline of March 2nd.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Mr. Gostad, did you want to add anything? I saw you just pop up online here.
I really don't have anything further to add. I did real briefly look at the RFP, and nothing really stuck out at me as being seemed appropriate. So everything seemed appropriate, I guess, when I took a look at it. But as Mr. Richards had indicated, I'll take further a deeper dive and review of the RFP before it goes out.
Thank you, Mr. Gostad. Mr. Holth?
Ms. Richards, I noticed in In the RFP, it just outlines that there's going to be a selection committee made up consisting of growth fund members and stakeholders of the Hive. Any idea how that, or when that selection committee will be selected?
Are you volunteering, Mr. Holt?
It's just a question. It's a question first. Your answer might answer that.
Well, it will, to a certain extent, depend on the response.
Sure.
You know, if we get a huge response, we'll look a little more closely at that review committee than a limited response. But yeah, we certainly haven't started asking for volunteers other than my statement right now.
Okay.
But yeah, that's what we're, a little bit of playing it by ear depending on the workload that committee will have.
Okay. And then just a comment, and I saw that the language is in here too, in terms of how a company will be selected. I think it's really important that we look at not just the dollar amount, but the mission, the reputation, and frankly, the future vision of the company that we're aligning ourselves with here. I mean, if the city is hitching our wagon to a company for this, I mean, I just think it's really, really important that that company will help us recruit people to this community and not hinder that. So whoever is on the selection committee, I hope that that's a robust discussion around that because, I mean, it's a big decision, right? I mean, it's a long-term decision here, what the naming rights of that building will be, and there's been a spotlight on that building for good reasons. It's an exciting thing for our community, and I just wouldn't want us to make a decision that would set that momentum backwards because there was a higher dollar amount offered.
Well, and, you know, typically when the city does bid something, it is dollar amount speaks, but we have stated that explicitly in the RFP document that certainly within the rights of the JDA to reject all of them or to accept a proposal that is not the highest dollar amount.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. Ms. Whitney?
I think, Ms. Richards, I think I would second what Mr. Holt is saying and wonder actually if that could be a requirement within the RFP to actually talk to us about why that particular company would be interested in the naming rights as a way to actually make that facility better for the community and how that would work. I wonder if that might be something as a friendly amendment to this RFP that this board would be considering or could consider.
Ms. Richards?
Well, we've got in the schedule proposal review evaluation interviews. So if you want to make it kind of explicit that the proposals will be expected to explain themselves before the review committee as well as the growth fund, we can certainly do that.
I don't know if we'd want to, this is just my personal opinion, I don't know if we want to, if we're going to appoint a committee to it, I'd rather have people from this committee make that decision with the group and not necessarily have the growth fund come and torpedo everything. And so I think if we appoint people to that committee and we have that committee, then we need to empower them to do their job to select the best person possible.
Are you suggesting, Ms. Whitney, that we put additional language in terms of the proposal requirements when submitting a proposal?
Yes, just in the sense of, you know, why you and how do you help move the vision of what this particular facility is actually. So it's naming rights, but to your point, right, there's a long-term commitment here of your adding value. So I just wonder if that might be something worth considering.
Well, I can certainly beef up the verbiage about that evaluation and selection criteria to kind of emphasize that we're doing this to make money, but the mission is really paramount here.
Mr. Kabami?
Just a quick question while we're talking about selection, is just the term, just, you know, the present value of the cash, if it's a 5-year at X dollars is greater than a 10-year at X dollars. I don't know if it's worth putting in there. I know we have language talking that there's different options that they can propose, but if we want to state that all things being equal, if you're paying up front, that's a better deal for the city than over 10 years.
Well, you can certainly, when Mr. Gostad and I get together, we can talk about how to put that in the appropriate legal terminology.
Yeah, just term, you know, that's all.
Thank you. Mr. Carrera?
Yeah, thank you. I'd also like to, I think, encourage whatever the committee that is selecting and whatnot. I think it'd be wise to have maybe even, and maybe do it in the application, the RFP, a breakdown of the scoring metrics, because I just don't want to have like, just in case, I mean, who are we to say that this group thinks that their mission aligns better, but what if somebody's offering $1 million and the next closest is $100,000? I mean, I don't foresee this happening, but, I mean, a general citizen of Grand Forks could say, my goodness, they're leaving $900,000 on the table because they like these people or they think the vision. I mean, it just becomes a little more subjective, and I think maybe it'd be wise to try to have a little more like objective criteria, and you can weight it however you want. So whether it be financial component, whether it be, you know, value, whether it be mission, alignment, and you can rank them all however you want. But I think that having that documented, or at least in your records of some sort of documentation of we chose them, this is the reason why we chose them, just in case there is a big discrepancy on, you know, what people want to come in at, I think it's better to have as much, you know, not just, oh, we had a good conversation with them, but there's actually, you know, a ranking system. I think that'd be wise. And also, a question, how did we come up with 500,000? Just kind of...
This was kind of a round number, but
Okay.
this was based on some input from the folks at Polaris.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea on naming rights, so,
Well,
but I was just curious.
We were glad for some advice, and it does seem, you know, 50,000 a year doesn't seem like a lot for that building. It seems reasonable, as a minimum. And I guess I would appreciate your concurrence of the reasonableness argument. And in terms of a scoring rubric, absolutely. It will be developed kind of in response, again, as I was saying, are we sorting through 15 proposals or 3?
Right.
But yes, we will have something that will document a path to a rational decision, not just, felt good. So.
Cool, thanks. Thank you.
Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, agree with all the committee members' comments. My question, Ms. Richard, would be, the document talks about funding received from sponsorship supporting the continued operation of the facility, fostering local tech identity, and providing sponsored high visibility space. So I'm curious on where the funds will go, and then who has responsibility to review, and is that the growth fund, or approve expenditures, or how do we envision that working? Where will the money go, and how will it be, who will be overseeing it and reviewing and approving those expenditures?
Well, we are in the process of working with our finance staff to kind of set up the best approach to segregate the Hive from the other JDA operations. You know, at this point, it's kind of been the Herald Building and a construction project. This will become actual revenue for a tech accelerator. And so I don't have a great answer for you as to how that will work, but that we are working on it. And where the role of the Hive Advisory Board begins and ends versus the fiduciary responsibility of the JDA. I think we've all gone into this with the idea that the budget is through the JDA. The advisory board can certainly make recommendations on priorities but it would be a recommending body rather than a decision-making body.
Thank you. Any further comments, or is there consensus to move forward with the staff action plan? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Ferry, motions?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Wolf. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item number 5, past due loans update. Ms. Richards.
All right, as you may recall, when we met in December, we had an item to talk about 2 of our borrowers who were past due. One was Amy's Place, a loan through our startup program, and the second was Mobile Recon, who had received an EDA RLF gap financing loan. The discussion at that time was to kind of go with what the borrowers were seeking in terms of restructuring, but that you really wanted to hear from those borrowers so you could kind of hear their story. Amy Burns, the representative from Amy's Place, could not be here today. We're looking at having her speak to these issues at the February meeting, but we do have Michael Dell from Mobile Recon. So I would like to just ask Mr. Dell to come up and kind of give you some background on where he's been and where he's going.
Good afternoon all. Trying to think where to best start. As you're well aware, I own Mobile Recon Systems. It's a drone manufacturing company here in Grand Forks. We work on very advanced drones and continuously trying to move forward, but we ended up in a situation where between COVID and other interfering factors, we did get in arrears on our loans. And it's something that I do not, I guess the biggest point I want to push is we have no intention of walking away from those loans. I brought my family out here from Kentucky and we bought a house in Petersburg. We don't plan on going anywhere. We're at a plateau with the business to where we came up, to be honest, we simply ran out of runway. I'm now in the process of getting that restructured, and we are entering into a major fundraising campaign where we will generate about $6.1 million in revenues in the next 3 months, and then we have another $50 million raise after that. That's come along fantastic. We have several high-end investors. They just want to see product before they invest. So that's been our catch, is we were hoping to be able to run this through to get through our crowdfunding campaign. So with that being said, we are on course with our crowdfunding campaign, and we absolutely, for lack of a better word, adore North Dakota. It's the type of place that that's why I moved my family out here. We've been looking for this type of entity for quite some time. Now, the purpose of moving on with Mobile Recon is we also have a second business I want to start here pertaining to generators and building generators to sell on drones and other purposes. The generator facility we hope to have up and going this summer post the crowdfunding campaign, which correlates directly with Mobile Recon. And unfortunately, without NDAs being signed, I can't go deep into that, but it's a truly remarkable environment to be into right now. We're looking at potential funding basis of approximately $6 billion in the next 5 years with that particular company. So by merging the two companies together, it would make it to where we actually want to have about 3 different companies here in Grand Forks, and we're looking at bringing in several very high-end 6-figure positions to fulfill for those companies, and bare minimum of about 60 employees. So with that being said, I'm here begging for compliance to where if we can get a little bridge, basically, that would endure through the crowdfunding campaign, that would be set off of that and could continue moving forward at a very strong pace. So with that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions, any opinions that any of you might have.
Thank you, sir. Any comments, Mr. Prairie?
I appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely.
And I think it's beneficial for all of us on the committee just to actually hear from you. I think that with what your long-term plan, I hope it's half as good as as it's hoping. I mean, that'd be fantastic. I guess a question I would have is the crowdfunding campaign, the money you raised, and you're planning on starting another spin-off, maybe I shouldn't call it a spin-off, but another company this summer.
Yes, sir.
Is that, are those, so this loan, I just want to make sure then, is the crowdfunding campaign, those funds and everything, are they under the same entity? Or are you trying, is it starting a new entity? So I just want to make sure that.
No, sir, it's on the same current entity of Mobile Recon. We've got, I wasn't aware how formal this would be, but I intend on bringing a slideshow to show our current progress. We have drones that are currently flying, and they're pretty amazing drones. They are all designed around the Part 107. They'll fly under Part 107, but we've actually got a drone on the ground and in the air that has a 1-hour flight time on batteries alone, and we have a 3-hour flight time using generators, up to 5 hours of flight time. Now that's considering up to a 30 to 40 pound payload under special conditions, and we could request COAs that would allow us to fly. One bird to work on particularly that this crowdfunding campaign is going toward is a bird known as the Excelsior, and it will have a payload option of up to 1,200 pounds and be a VTOL as well. So it's being designed for purposes of natural disasters to fly the drone in, pick up wounded individuals, flying back out. Extreme safety, and also gearing it toward DOD to where we can fly the drone in, pick up wounded soldiers on the battlefield and flying back out under fire without risking our corpsmen or risking other humans to risk their life for a wounded individual, which I am ex-military. I was a tanker when I was in the Army. And that was one thing that I both faced and was quite obviously aware of, is the Then we always like to take pot shots at a certain individual until someone's dumb enough to try to help them. And you end up losing 6 to 10 soldiers that way. This is designed to fly ammunition, medicine, medical supplies into a low-lying area, unmanned, and then fly back out, picking up a wounded soldier off the battlefield or off an entertainment center, again, totally unmanned. So it cuts down the cost and risk of any type of veteran retrieval, basically, or wounded soldier retrieval. And it's not, we've built our first prototype, it works great. We're moved on to the next stages now. The prototype we actually built it about 5 years ago. And on our first time out, we successfully lifted just under 200 pounds. Now we've got this one set where we'll lift 1,200 pounds with about 800-pound margin. So it's honestly too long to get into a lot of the basis about it, but it's not a concept, it's a proven fact that it will do what it's done. And I've had several discussions. We've competed in DARPA agreements with the Marine Corps, and it's something they had heavy requests for, and it's basically defense of the last mile proposition that they put out, and it's designed to haul not only payload, but eventually people. So we want to start with payload, upwards of 1,000 to 1,200 pounds hauling payload on a VTOL basis, and then moving on to one person and 2 up to 5 people. The first ones we've done under ultralight premise, so no special warranties, guarantees, no examinations, no certifications. It's strictly as an ultralight configuration. Then we use that basis to go back to the Civil Air Committees and say, okay, look, we've done this is the safety protocols we put in place, and take it on to a manned level. So we can do it with one person, but we can't go beyond that point without being a certified pilot being on board. So it is a very exciting adventure. We've had a lot of interest, kind of odd interest. We've actually had interest from a company in Florida who wants to use them to fly the yacht owners from the yachts to restaurants on the beach, just kind of a status symbol. And we've got one that wants to be a kind of high-end backer that's his one guideline in investing in the company is he used to be the first one to fly from his yacht to the restaurant. So it's something that we enjoy doing, love doing. I think right now we are still the only drone manufacturer in North Dakota. We don't want to drop it, we want to pursue it, and I'd much rather pay the loans back than forfeit. Yeah. So I'm just looking for assistance and aid in getting those loans paid back. It's like I don't want to take advantage of North Dakota. Like, again, I can't say enough of how proud we are to live in North Dakota.
Thank you.
And so, first of all, thank you for your service. And obviously you can tell you're passionate about it, and half the stuff you're saying is going over my head. Again, I wish you the best and everything. Just want to make sure, just clear then, so that crowdfunding campaign, and if it's all under Mobile Recon, okay, great. So those funds, are you going to start with those funds? Are those have to be allocated a certain way then because of the crowdfunding in nature, or can you use those funds? Do you have to get back on track with the loan, or are those tied up in something, so then you have to generate the revenue under normal circumstances to pay back the loan? Or can you kind of go through how you plan on paying that back?
Yeah, let me clarify that. We're going with a company called Start Engine, and they're notorious. They've had successfully funded at least a dozen drone companies with great success. We're talking the area of 80 to 90 million success rates. The way this particular crowdfunding campaign works is you set up a campaign, you do videos, so on and so forth. You launch a campaign, and the campaign is based on a series of rolling closes. So it doesn't have a single closing date. As soon as it reaches a benchmark, you can close that out, open a second rolling close, third rolling close. We're looking at running that campaign for about 3 months. That 3 months should bring us into about $6.1 million. We've got about 1,500 emails of our own that we'll send out to promote the campaign. We've got a serious campaign promotion along with that, with videos, so on and so forth. So to get to your point, the money can and will be used directly from those crowdfunding campaigns as being part of the company, since we're using it on a pre-structured company. That those are known debts of the company. We've already made the company aware that we have the bank debts, and that would be one of the purposes of the loans. It's something that we will not use those funds to start up Regen. It's strictly used for mobile recon and the advancement of our current drones and the program. I purposely have not taken payment for, I think, 8 months now, which is fun to survive on, but We've basically been holding the company with my own personal funds. I'm just out of my personal funds now. So it's a matter of turning things back around and keeping Mobile Recon up and going. That's my main concern.
Thank you. Mr. Wolf?
Yeah, thank you again for being here. And Mr. Carreri asked the majority of my questions. So crowdfunding, you asked who you're coming with. It's 3 months. You're looking for some time. That was good for clarification for myself. And then refresh my memory as far as company is pre-revenue at this point, I believe, or
Yes,
is,
sir.
yes. So pre-revenue, any comments on when estimates of when revenue would begin being generated?
That's actually a good question. I've owned this company for 8 years now. We spent about 7 years before North Dakota contacted us and asked us to move up here to be a representative of North Dakota. All that time has been spent in R&D and product improvements, where I didn't want to release a drone that wasn't going to fly or had issues, so I want to make sure everything was set. So in all honesty, we've been running this through a series of R&D changes and doing flight testing. We just got caught in the long term with supply problems through COVID. We lost a few employees through COVID. It just caught us with our pants down, so we're trying to pull them back up and get things back up on the straight and narrow. The products are, I'd say, with Mobile Recon, our primary product, which is the Kitty Hawk, which is 2 variants of it, our final stage of that is getting some metal parts made for sales. So upon getting those metal parts sales, we've got probably about 600 flight hours on them. We know they're proven. We know they can fly for extreme times, lift extreme weights, are a very well-made product. So they're certainly ready for the open market. And this is not a walk-in off the street type of market. It's usually countries, states, entities, organizations that purchase our drones. They have a very nice price point. We have a very, very nice profit venue on them. We run about a 70% profit margin. So it's a matter of getting finalized to the point, and that's what we will do through the crowdfunding portion of this, is get the final money and to get the final parts made and delivered and put on the drones.
So thank you for that. So again, products are close. Your best guess, would you be revenue generating within 2023 or?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
We have them to the point where they are, we actually have a trade show scheduled, which is the World Disaster Relief Organization, and we will be in front of, I've got about a half hour with FEMA, I've got about a half hour with different organizations that would highly benefit the company and getting the company into further government channels. We've already had good standings in government channels. We've competed against military channels, and won, by the way. We actually won against delivering medical supplies against Harriers and proved that we could do it more efficiently and far more cost effective. So with that being said, I don't want to put the drones out until they are certainly ready, and we're at the point where we are ready to do that. It's getting over this final bridge of getting those metal parts where we need to replace the plastic parts that are on the birds.
Okay. Thank you, appreciate
So
the
it is a
update.
very positive outlook on the company, and for what I personally have invested in it, I won't let this go.
Thank you. Ms. Whitney?
For the Start Engine crowdfunding campaign, when does that go live?
They'll go live in 2 or 3 weeks. Right now, we're converting our LLC into a C corporation, so that's the biggest thing that's holding us up, is getting the C corporation converted, and we're supposed to have that done. Hopefully this week, we'll have it fully converted and submitted.
And then how long does that campaign stay open again?
The campaign will run 3 months, but we can start doing draws a month after it opens.
Okay, thank you.
That's due to SEC regulations, and our hands are tied on that one. They said that campaign must be active for at least 3 weeks. Then you give the starters of the campaign a week to figure their disbursement and vote on disbursement.
And what's your strategy, as with any good crowdfunding campaign, it really is dependent on how well you get the word out. So what's your strategy to maximize your ability to make that a successful crowdfunding campaign?
We're actually going to do live advertising on Facebook, through LinkedIn. We're going to do previous inquiries over the past 8 years to people who have inquired about our birds, and hit them to let them know that the notice is live. We also have a support of a Veterans Foundation out of Tennessee that will heavily push it toward veterans, since it is a veteran business, and we have direct implications to the national defense and military. So it's basically, the end run is what we're calling the Excelsior. and its usefulness in recovery and funding of the military sources.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Really, just really quickly, thanks for being here, thanks for all the context. So with all of that context, do you have an idea when we would receive our next payment on this?
We wanted to get it started a little earlier. In my ignorance, when you're an entrepreneur, you tend to forget about holidays and Christmas and such. I, in turn, did so we lost a couple weeks to that, where I did not plan for that. So to answer your question, we should be able to take our first live draw right around the middle of February. And my intention is to get fully repaid on our what we owe in the rears, and then keep up consistent. My goal is to do an early payoff on it, especially with the venues that we have coming up. I'd much prefer, and I'd much rather come back to the growth fund to help us grow further when the time is necessary. One of our goals is to build a rather large facility here for both entities. So that's, again, we're hoping to draw not only people from in Grand Forks, but also from out of Grand Forks, outer running areas and several specialists. And we are very highly dependent on our engineers. And we've got about 3 to 6 engineers that we've been pulling in from outside of North Dakota and having them relocate to North Dakota.
Okay.
And it's, again, we're looking at several very six-figure jobs that will go into Grand Forks economy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. In the interest of time, we've only got a few more minutes, so I thank you for your time.
I tend to talk a lot, I'm sorry.
That's all right. We're used to that. So, thanks for coming in, and thanks for updating us with everything. And
Absolutely.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Whitney.
Second.
Second by Holt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Say, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We're adjourned.
Thank you very much for your time.